These three siblings heroically took down their sister's killers.
Did he say anything to you before he...
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, say a prayer.
Say a prayer?
Yeah.
Pay attention to the girl in the blue pajamas. Notice how she looks happy in this footage, filmed on Christmas Eve. Her parents are together, her brother is there, even her little sister, Sarah. But life is about to take a disturbing turn for the worse after her parents get divorced. The mother, Patricia, wins custody of the kids. She will drag them down a horrible nightmare that will end in the worst case of abduction the state of Florida has ever seen.
What is your emergency? I found a little girl this morning down Shelly Highway with her neck. Yeah, she ain't good about 9 or 10.
8-year-old Sayeh Rivazfar, taken from her bedroom with her sister, abused and left for dead in the middle of the woods. But she survived, outsmarting her captor. And even after everything she went through, she led the police straight to the monster who did this. She wanted to make sure he would pay for what he took from her.
There was a meaning to my survival, to make sure that it never happened again.
It's September 22nd, 1988. In the small town of Jay, Florida, a couple drives down the highway in their blue truck when they spot a young girl flagging them down, waving one hand in the air, holding the other to her throat. The couple stops and approaches the girl. Her neck is bleeding profusely. The man gives her a t-shirt to hold against her wound, while the woman calls 911. At 6:30 a.m., the Rosa County Sheriff's Office receives this phone call.
What is your emergency? I found a little girl this morning down Shelly Highway with her neck cut. Yeah, she ain't good about 9 or 10. Okay, are you going to stay there at the door? Yes, until the county shows up. Okay. If the sheriff passes out on me, then I'm going to head to the hospital.
Sergeant Bill McCurdy is the first on the scene, followed by EMTs. While the paramedics get the girl inside the ambulance, they tell Sergeant McCurdy to get all the details he can from her now because, they say, she will not live through this. Barely conscious, the girl is able to recount the terrible assault. She pleads for him to go help Sarah. He then learns the girl was taken into the woods along with her sister, who is nowhere to be found.
They put her on the stretcher and went rolling her to the back of the truck. I told her that I'm going to go find your sister.
But before the EMTs close the door and take off, McCurdy asks her one last question that will change everything.
I clearly asked her, who did this to you? And she looked at me and she said, Ray. Ray did it.
The year is 1987. Sayeh is 7 years old and lives with her mother and her siblings. She barely sees her father anymore because Patricia, her mother, got full custody. The problem is, Patricia is an alcoholic and nowhere near the mother to them that she should be.
My mother was physically abusive. I tried to keep the abuse from my younger siblings. It was a tough place to be.
Without a responsible adult around to take care of the kids, Sayeh steps into the role of her mother.
I cooked breakfast for my brother and my sister. I took care of my mother when she had her migraines from her hangovers.
And while her mother doesn't mind spending most of her nights at the local bars, she often brings home her many boyfriends, exposing her kids to strange men she sometimes barely knows herself. One of them, a man named Ray White.
He was the worst of them all, and it became a very scary situation with him.
At first, Ray seems nice to the kids, buying gifts and treats. And Patricia keeps him around longer than most. More and more, he tries to take the role of the father figure, showing interest in the kids, in Sarah, but mostly Sayeh. After a while, he begins to take Sayeh aside, alone, but her mother doesn't say a thing. What she doesn't know is that Ray is forcing Sayeh to do things no child should ever do.
It was a pact that he said that what he does to me, I am to tell no one, otherwise he'll kill my family.
Child services are called home on many occasions after cigarette burns are found on Sayeh's hands or a bruised lip on Sarah. But nothing changes. For months, Sayeh goes through her ordeal in silence, doing all she can to protect her baby brother and her sister. After a year, Patricia leaves Ray and falls into the arms of another man. But Sayeh, as a child, only understands that Ray doesn't come to the house as often as before, without knowing why or if he'll come back. It's September 21st, 1988. Patricia leaves the kids to head to the local bar, as is her usual habit. She leaves her new boyfriend behind to watch over the kids. Sayeh is getting her brother and sister ready for bed, making them brush their teeth and change into their pajamas.
It was a school night. We had to be in bed by 8. Me being the oldest, I thought of the genius idea of Sarah and I getting ready for school the night before. We put on our school clothes, and that's what we slept in.
It's 12:30 a.m. Sayeh is woken up by a man carrying her out of bed and out of the house.
I looked up, I saw that it was Ray, and I asked him where we were going, and he had said, "We're going to see your mother."
He carries her out the back door and places her in the front seat of his car. Then he goes back inside. When he comes out, Sayeh sees that Ray is carrying her sister, Sarah, then places her in the back seat. Ray gets behind the wheel and drives off. After only 20 minutes, the car slows down and turns onto a dirt road. The car stops, but there's no sign of their mother. Sayeh understands something is terribly wrong. She knows what Ray is capable of, but she has to protect her little sister.
He pulls me aside once he stops the car and says, "Did you tell anybody about our secret?"
Sayeh tells the truth, that she didn't tell anyone. He seems pleased with her answer. He goes to the trunk of the car, grabs a few things, then opens the back door to where Sarah is, and begins to tie her up.
He ties her hands up and her legs up. And at that point, we started to cry. He pulls me out of the car and brings me back to the trunk and changes into a pair of white shorts.
Ray then forces himself on 8-year-old Sayeh.
Sarah saw this, started crying hysterically and asking why he was doing this. And all I could do is tell her that it's gonna be okay and it's almost over.
All of a sudden, a pair of headlights turn onto the road and start getting closer. He rushes her back inside and threatens her once more to keep quiet. Sayeh can't help but hope that the driver of the car will notice Ray's white shorts are covered in blood.
He talks to this person and says, "I'm just having car trouble, we're all set." The man in the truck takes off.
As the car leaves, Sayeh's last hope goes with him. It's 6 a.m., the day is breaking. Sayeh has suffered unimaginably for the last 5 hours, when finally, Ray makes her get up.
He tells me to put my pants back on and to stand outside his car. And he goes and picks up Sarah because she's still tied up. And he carries her right behind me and tells me to walk into the woods. He sets my sister down on the side of the tree, and I stand in front and face him. And he says, "Say your prayers." And I say my prayers as he takes out a knife.
Ray holds the knife to Sayeh's neck and attempts to take her life.
I don't feel any pain, and all I can do is touch my neck. I see the blood, and I drop to the ground.
I close my eyes, and I just think to myself, I have to play dead, otherwise he's gonna come back and kill me indefinitely.
Sayeh lays silent on the ground, awake, eyes closed. She can't let her sister know she's okay. She can't help her or protect her because he'll kill her. All she can do is listen and be quiet and wait for him to leave.
I hear Sarah screaming and crying, and I feel her on the ground kicking. Just a few minutes later, Sarah was no longer screaming and crying.
She feels him jump over her body and run back to the car. Only when she hears the car drive off does she dare move.
I called her name out over and over again, but I knew by the look of her that she wasn't going to answer me.
All her young life, Sayeh's only concern was to protect Sarah. But now, she has to walk out of the woods without her.
At that point, I felt so numb that all I could think about is getting help for Sarah and I. So I'm walking out towards the dirt road with one hand on my throat. All of a sudden, I see a blue truck pass from the dirt road, and I'm waving it, trying to wave it down. It stopped, and I walked up to it, and it was a couple.
What is your emergency? I found a little girl this morning down State Highway with her neck cut.
Though she's barely conscious, one thing is clear in her mind: the last image of her sister and of the man responsible.
I wanted to make sure Ray White was captured and punished for what he had done to my sister and I.
Immediately, I told them that Ray killed my sister. And they said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes."
Within minutes of hearing Sayeh's story, officers descend on Ray White's home.
This is the sheriff's department. You need to go outside, put your hands on top of your head. Your house has been surrounded.
This is a joke?
No, sir, this is not a joke.
It's September 22nd, 7 a.m. While Sayeh is rushed to the hospital, Sergeant Bill McCurdy goes to the stretch of the road where Sayeh said he would find her sister. But as Sayeh suspected, she's no longer alive. Sayeh's heart stops in the ambulance, twice more on the operating table. When she wakes up, all she can think about is that monster and the nightmares that come with him. A few hundred miles away, her father Ahmed gets the worst phone call of his life. He takes the next flight out to Florida to come see Sayeh and to identify the body of 6-year-old Sarah.
I felt I was submerged in ice. It was so difficult for me to even breathe. I couldn't even stand up or walk. And they dragged me out of the morgue.
Ahmed has been fighting for years to gain custody of his children. Now that the fight is won and he can take Sayeh and her brother home, there is no celebration, no cheer, only grief. It's 1989. As Ray White goes to trial, Sayeh is now 9 years old. She has a long recovery ahead of her, but one thing she feels strongly about is her role in the trial.
I knew I had to testify. This was for Sarah. And I wanted to make sure that she knew I did good for us.
Did he say anything to you before he cut your throat?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, say a prayer.
Say a prayer?
Yeah.
All I could think about is the next little girl that he could take advantage of, and I wanted to make sure that was stopped.
She had to stand up from the witness stand, look over and point out the defendant who had cut her throat and murdered her sister in front of her. You could not help but be struck by her strength and her resolve.
The jury finds Ray White guilty of kidnapping, sexual battery, attempted murder, and first-degree murder. He's sentenced to death.
There was relief. There was relief, and knowing that we made this happen. Through this whole process, I had the strength, and I truly believe that my sister was with me.
Sayeh now works as a New York State Trooper. To this day, she continues her quest to protect others.
I wanted to be able to get the monsters off the streets and be able to handcuff them and put them away so that they couldn't hurt children. I know that Sarah's out there looking down on me, keeping me safe. That's my guardian angel.
I've never known somebody be so in tune in everything they do. She loves life and she lives it. She is my inspiration.
Courage for me is defined by one of the greats, Maya Angelou. History, despite its retching pain, cannot be unlived, but it's faced with courage need not be lived again. I wanted to honor Sarah, my sister, and provide awareness and even possibly prevention by sharing my story to victims, families. My mission was to become a strong voice for all young girls, all women, all crime victims, and their families. A mission of hope to light that pathway for those who are walking this dark path that I traveled as a child. A fighter for those who need me now. Know this, I will never give up that fight.
Growing up, Shelly Nagle was always protective of her little sister Sherry. When she got pregnant at only 15, Shelly was by her side, and since then, never stopped looking out for her. 8 years later, Shelly is throwing a big birthday party for her youngest son. She expects her little sister to join the celebration, yet she fails to show up.
When I didn't hear from her at all, I felt like something bad could have happened.
In the small town of Altoona, rumors start spreading that Sherry has run away, leaving her husband and children behind.
Deserted by their own mother. That's the story Sherry Leedy's children grew up believing.
My sister would never have just left the kids. Left him, yes. Left the kids, no.
When Shelly took her suspicions to the police, they refused to look into the case because of the rumors. But there was no way Shelly could accept this. Instead, she began investigating on her own by opening a Facebook page and directly messaging the various suspects she identified along the way.
This case went cold for more than a decade. Really, what took so long?
Sherry's sister Shelly started a Facebook page to solicit information.
She'll do whatever she can to share her sister's story.
I had faith that I would be able to find her.
Even if it would turn the entire world against her, Shelly was ready to risk it all to find her sister.
Anything I could do, I was always looking for something, anything.
In the small town of Altoona, Pennsylvania, Shelly awaited her sister's arrival before singing happy birthday to her youngest son.
Thought everything would be fine. We never missed any of the kids' birthday parties, but everybody was there except for her.
Finally, someone rang the doorbell, and Shelly went to get it right away.
And there stood Sherry's husband and his dad, Ken Bleedy.
When asked about Sherry, her husband said she recently left town to live with her boyfriend in Maine. Before he could continue, his father cut him off.
Then Ken said something like, "I can't believe she left the kids."
Sheldon, the sister's father, told Aaron and Kenneth to leave. Afterward, he went to the police. While he was gone, Shelly kept trying to understand what happened. Why did Kenneth come along with Aaron? Why would Sherry leave without telling anyone?
I didn't think that sounded right. Thought Aaron was lying, but I just didn't know why.
A few days later, Sheldon received terrible news from the detectives.
The police in Altoona had no reason to believe that she was in danger or that a crime had been committed. Their belief was simply that she had decided to leave and have no contact with her family.
Altoona was a small town, and rumors spread fast. Aside from Sherry's siblings, who knew something was off, everybody seemed to think that history was simply repeating itself.
Our mother had abandoned all of us at a young age. I knew 100% that Sherry would never leave her children because that happened to us. There was nothing more important to that girl than her children.
1 month later, the police visited the ladies and interviewed Sherry's father-in-law.
All the information was that Sherry got up to leave for work on a Friday morning. Her father-in-law, Kenneth Leedy, dropped her off where she worked, and that was the last time anyone had seen Sherry Leedy.
Kenneth eventually had to tell his 3 young grandchildren why their mother left them.
The Leedys led them children to believe that their mother ran off with another man, and that's why she wasn't around.
As the year went along, the ladies completely cut off Sherry's family from their own.
I was around my nieces and nephews all the time. Our kids played together. After her disappearance, that came to an end.
But this didn't stop Sheldon, Sherry's father, from at least trying to get more information from the ladies. He kept calling them, hoping they'd remember any more details about her disappearance. He also never stopped pushing for the police to do something.
That's what was a little worrisome. The police said, well, she's an adult and she can leave on her own if she wants. They had no answers. They haven't, seen her, heard of her, nothing. I feel like he kind of lost hope as far as getting any help from law enforcement.
During that period, the immense stress Sheldon kept subjecting himself to eventually took its toll. His already fledgling health kept getting worse and worse. Ultimately, he was hospitalized and couldn't fight for his daughter anymore. When the doctors told him that his time was coming, he summoned Shelly to his side.
Our dad was definitely heartbroken over the whole ordeal. I think he felt like he let her down, like he wasn't there for her. The last time I was at the hospital with him, I did promise him that I'm gonna find her, I'm gonna bring her home. He passed away 2 days later. I believe my dad did die of a broken heart.
After she promised her father she would find Sherry, Shelly scoured the town, knocked on everybody's doors, and called anyone she could think of. Her investigation went on for 6 agonizing years without yielding any results. All the while, Richard kept trying to get the police to help, but they simply ignored him. Eventually, Shelly refocused her efforts online, first through MySpace in 2003, then via Facebook around 2009.
I started searching on a couple social medias. First started sending friend requests to anybody I could think of, her friends, my friends.
In 2011, Facebook implemented a new feature that completely changed how people used the platform. Group pages allowed users to gather and interact around a single subject matter, giving Shelly an idea.
And I just thought, well, I'll just make her a page and see if that helps at all. The Facebook page is what started everything.
The issue with her previous efforts was that in Altoona, everyone knew each other and rumors spread fast, so nobody seemed to be ready to risk it by publicly divulging what they knew. But things were different behind the curtain of anonymity offered by the internet. One of the first people to reach out to her was an individual known as John B. He claimed to be a neighbor of the ladies and witnessed that their behavior completely changed since Sherry's disappearance.
He said the doors used to be open all the time because he used to go in and hang out with them. But after Sherry went missing, no one was outside, and the only person you could speak to was Aaron's dad.
More concerning messages started pouring in, most of them pointing towards Kenneth, Aaron, and some even at Ryan, the mysterious boyfriend the ladies claimed had taken Sherry to Maine. John B. too kept messaging the page, claiming that Sherry told him how Kenneth was obsessed with her and how scared she was to be left alone with him. Aaron's ex-girlfriend also told her that his son, Shelly's nephew, knew where his mother was, the ladies' 150 acres of camping grounds up in Warriors Mark. At the same time, an individual hidden behind an anonymous account told her this: Sherry's still alive, but you will never see her again.
For someone to say something like that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I have to tell the police this because this was something we never even heard of.
But even this string of revelations wasn't enough to get the police to start an investigation. Shelly knew she needed concrete evidence if she'd ever hoped to get the authorities' attention.
Sherry had been missing for 11 years. I had faith that I would be able to find her.
So she started digging into her sister's past, looking for anything she could have missed 12 years ago. And this is when Shelly finally identified the missing link, the one person nobody even attempted to talk to since Sherry's disappearance.
I tried a new tactic to get more information, so I began looking for Ryan. I knew Ryan's last name, so I eventually came across him through, I believe it was his wife's page.
Even though she believed that Aaron and Kenneth were somehow involved, it didn't necessarily mean that Ryan, the mysterious boyfriend who allegedly took Sherry to Maine in 1999, wasn't a potential suspect.
I wasn't sure what his involvement was, so I didn't want to say too much. I just needed to know from him where he thought my sister was.
Shelly sent him a message, crossed her fingers, and armed herself with patience. 3 days after asking him if he had any information about Sherry, Ryan finally answered.
He reached back out to me and said he did remember her, and the last time he saw her was when Aaron confronted him. He told me that him and Sherry were in the alley behind the lady's house.
In an altercation that Shelly never heard about before, Aaron and Ryan got into a fistfight over Sherry. Her sister attempted to break them off, but Aaron pushed her away and told her he wouldn't hesitate to kill her if she was ever seen with Ryan again.
This was a huge piece of information. He told me Sherry just ended it with him there. She had never moved with him to Maine, so what could have happened to her? The whole story of her leaving was based around this, and according to him, this wasn't true.
Shelly wanted to go to the police right away, but her brother Richard reminded her that after years of harassing the authorities, the police stopped trusting them a long time ago. Instead, he asked Ryan to do them a favor.
He got Ryan to talk to the police to verify Sherry never left this town with him.
And finally, for the first time in 12 years, the Altoona police were considering declaring Sherry missing and opening a case.
Reaching out to Ryan was the reason that she had credibility as far as the Altoona Police Department was concerned. So Shelly really gets the credit there.
Now that the police officially declared Sherry missing and that Ryan had been eliminated from the list of potential suspects, Shelly finally made her move. She told the police that the person responsible for her sister's disappearance was most likely Aaron Lady, probably with the help of his father, Kenneth.
Aaron Lady was absolutely a person of interest, and the fact that he believed she was cheating on him would have led to him possibly having motive to kill her.
Afterward, months went by without any action from the police. Shelly knew they would eventually interview Aaron again, but she was tired of constantly waiting on them. So, she decided to take matters into her own hands once again. She headed to the courthouse to gather more information on Sherry and Aaron's divorce. She discovered a document dating June 10, 1999, stating that Sherry would be granted legal and physical custody of the children after the procedure. Convinced that she finally got her hand on the actual motive of the crime, she returned to the police, and once again, they dismissed her findings as irrelevant.
We were skeptical, to say the least. It seemed as if Aaron was attempting to cooperate with law enforcement the entire time, but they still had suspicions.
Aaron's willingness to work with the police pushed the investigators in another direction. What if his father, Kenneth, acted out of his own accord? That's when they decided to do something that should have probably been done 13 years ago. After dropping Sherry off on the day of her disappearance, Kenneth claims that he went to work, so the police finally checked with his employers if they could corroborate this.
He said he was at work, and he wasn't at work. And if he was not involved, there would be no reason to lie to the police.
Following this discovery, they sat with Aaron a second time.
We didn't know whose team Aaron was on, so we needed to make sure that he knew he was going to be a focus as well as his dad, and we needed his help.
Except for a few texts from the Facebook group, the police still had no evidence at all. They had a motive against Aaron, but nothing concerning Kenneth. They knew they were onto something because Kenneth categorically refused to collaborate. The cops also knew about Warrior's Mark, the presumed location of Sherry's body that Shelly shared with them a year earlier. Still, Kenneth refused to allow them to search the property, and the DA denied a search warrant due to the lack of evidence. Instead, he proposed a different idea.
Under the wiretap law in Pennsylvania, if one person agrees to make a phone call to the other, they can consent to be recorded. Aaron agreed to call his father to see if Kenneth would talk about the case.
At the police barrack, the detectives hooked Aaron's phone onto a recording device and had him call his father. They also provided him with a script and told him to stick to it, but Aaron quickly lost his cool as the conversation went along. He intended to prove to them that his father was innocent. However, it seemed like he too had been fooled all along.
The way Ken was answering, Aaron knew that something happened. He knew his father was lying to him.
Aaron was upset on the phone, his dad was upset on the phone, and out of the blue, Kenneth said, "I did it."
He claims that it was an accident. He confronted her on the street after he learned she had been seeing Ryan. He allegedly only wanted to push her around, not kill her, but eventually, she fell to the ground, hitting her head in the process. Shelly was shocked when the police shared the news with her.
It didn't seem real. Like, this was the first time I heard someone say that Sherry wasn't here anymore.
During the call, the detectives couldn't help but notice how Kenneth meticulously chose his words. It seemed like he knew how to differentiate murder from manslaughter and aimed to be charged with the latter. Now armed with the recording of his confession, the police didn't lose any more time.
That's when I sent troopers and the detectives up to Altoona to interview Ken at his residence.
At the lady's home, the detective immediately revealed to Kenneth that he had been recorded and that they planned to arrest him for the murder of Sherry. Then, suddenly, he stood up and punched the trooper in front of him right in the face.
He assaulted a police officer, knocked the police officer to the ground.
At this point, Mr. Leedy run upstairs where he had a gun. There's a slight scuffle. They tackle him in the residence. He was handcuffed, and Mr. Leedy was placed in the Blair County Prison with aggravated assault charges against the troopers and the detective.
Thanks to Shelly's years-long effort, Kenneth was locked up, and the police also knew the approximate location of Sherry's body. While investigating online, Shelly learned about Warrior's Mark, the ladies' family camping ground. She was convinced this was where they would find Sherry. At 150 acres, the area was large, but still manageable. So following Kenneth's arrest, the Pennsylvania State Police started searching.
Everyone had high hopes that we were going to find this missing lady in fairly short order.
Eventually, there were between 50 and 100 people on the property searching from early morning until dusk.
According to the DA, finding the body was the only way they could make sure Kenneth would get sentenced for murder. He was convinced Sherry's remains would prove her death was more than a simple accident. He brought in woodland experts, cadaver dogs, and local hunters, but couldn't find anything helpful. After searching for 5 days, the sergeant in charge of the search made a somewhat controversial decision.
After we searched the property for the first week, the decision was made by myself and my superiors that it was time for us to pull off the property.
Shelly couldn't believe it. All of her efforts were in vain. She had waited 13 years for this, and the police officially canceled all search efforts after only 5 days.
All this time, I just wanted to get out and start digging myself.
Following the cancellation, the authorities were out of options, so the DA followed with another, greatly disputed choice. Acting out of his own accord, and without the consent of Shelly nor Richard, he went directly to Kenneth's attorney.
I made the decision to go to Leidy's attorneys and try to come up with a deal. I put third-degree murder on the table.
Now, even forensic evidence couldn't change the verdict. No matter what they'd find in the woods, Kenneth could expect a shot at parole after only 7 years in jail.
I was very angry. I didn't understand why they had to make a deal with him, and without asking the family first how we felt.
The next day, the detectives brought Kenneth to Warrior's Mark and started searching again for Sherry. After a few mishaps, Kenneth pointed out a rock mound by the camping grounds where he usually brought his grandchildren to camp during the summer.
I started throwing rocks off the pile. A void appeared. As I leaned forward on the rocks, I was on all fours and I could look down in the hole. There's a bone in that hole. We knew we had found Sherry Lane.
For the past 13 years, Sherry's children have camped with their grandfather right next to the remains of their own mother.
I think he's evil. All this time the kids thinking their mom left them all along knowing what he did to their mom.
The discovery of Sherry's remains countered Kenneth's claims.
There was no way it was an accident. Caused that type of injury, Candy would have had to have dropped a bowling ball on her head accidentally.
While in detention, Kenneth refused to talk to the police. He admitted that he used a weapon to murder Sherry, but refused to explain further. Looking into his past, one could easily assume that Sherry's end was dire. Amongst the multiple rumors of sexual violence surrounding him, Shelly learned that he allegedly raped his wife's sister and a teenage girl back in his hometown. So Shelly and Richard suppose that Kenneth probably attempted to rape their sister, but she fought back and he killed her in response. Even if he refused to collaborate with the police after discovering the body, Kenneth was only sentenced to 7 to 14 years of prison, as promised by the DA. Now that the case was closed once and for all, Shelly, Richard, and their families finally paid their respect to their returned sister.
When we finally got her home, we did have a memorial service for her. She was then buried with our father. I miss Sherry a lot, and I know that she's finally at rest. She's with our dad. He just wanted to be with her.
But their rest was short-lived. In 2020, Kenneth's minimum sentence was completed and was allowed to attempt parole.
When Kenneth Leedy came up for his first parole hearing in 2020, I did speak in front of the parole board.
And every year moving forward, Shelly must carry on the fight for her sister. Here's an excerpt from one of her addresses. In it, she is directly talking to Kenneth.
My family has been through living hell not knowing what happened to Sherry. We knew she would have never left her young children. Sherry's most basic right, her right to life, was cruelly and unjustly taken from her. I lost a sister, but they lost a mother.
On top of her addresses to the parole board, Shelly continues to manage her sister's memorial page on Facebook. Together with the community she assembled there, she's doing everything possible to keep Kenneth Lady incarcerated.
I did start a petition. The first hearing, I think I had over 2,000, and the second hearing, I had over 7,000.
In her book, Through a Sister's Eyes, published in 2016, Shelly recalled losing more than her sister in 1999. She lost her faith in law enforcement and ultimately the criminal justice system. The sentiment was also shared by the DA responsible for Kenneth's condemnation in 2013.
I can't speak to what happened in 1999. Would we have done things different today? Yeah, probably.
If it wasn't for Shelly, I still believe to this day that we would not know where Sherry is.
I know Sherry would have done the same for me. I promised my dad, and Sherry was my best friend. Just an amazing person.
Today, the memory of Sherry lives on through Shelly, Richard, and her now adult children. For the sake of all the other families with a missing loved one, Shelly keeps marching on, fighting not only for Sherry, but all victims of violence.
Overall, I just wanted to get her story out there. I will continue to be Sherry's voice, and any opportunity available to me, I will tell her story.
I don't really have very many friends, but the friends I do have, I'm very loyal to. So even losing one is a heavy blow for me.
This man was the last person to see 19-year-old Lee Porter before she disappeared. He claims he's a worried friend, and he goes on TV to plead for her safe return. But he's also the prime suspect.
She said she was tired and she just wanted to crash, so I said okay. And shortly afterwards, she took off. I want her to be safe, and I want her to know that I want the best for her.
You lying son of a...
Desperate to find Lee, her family decides to take matters into their own hands. What really happened to her would remain a mystery, unless her own brother could take down the man responsible for her disappearance.
I would give up my own life to find her. I started making him believe that he was helping us look for her.
The whole time, Max was recording this on his phone.
Just start letting it out, man. I know it's hard. You gotta let it out right now. I need my sister back. Where is she? This is it. Right. This is it. You think I'm just gonna let you walk away and drive away?
It's 2005. Lee Porter lives with her brother Max, her mom Renee Jackson, and her stepdad Michael in Agua Dulce, California, about 45 miles north of Los Angeles. Renee went through a messy divorce with the kid's biological father when they were really young, and now they don't have contact with him. Growing up, Lee's brother Max helps give her stability and support, and they're very close.
She followed him everywhere, and she just wanted to be like him.
We did everything together, listened to the same music, did the same things, fought like brother and sister all the time.
In 2006, they moved to Cotopaxi, Colorado, a very small town about 3 hours away from Denver. They can see mountains from their house, and it's a beautiful place to raise a family. What they didn't know before they moved is that it's part of what's known as Prison Valley, which has over 10 prisons. It concerns Renee when she learns about it, but the family has a peaceful start in their new home, and the kids make new friends at school. In 2013, Lee graduates from high school, and Max graduates from Trinidad State College with a degree in massage therapy. He moves to California, working to start a massage therapy business. Lee hopes to follow in his footsteps at Trinidad State and get the same degree so they can eventually run the business together. But after Max moves away, she struggles being alone at school. Max texts and calls his little sister whenever he can, hoping to help her adjust to college life.
At first, her responses were quite positive, but over time, she texted me saying that she was having a hard time. She was depressed.
She missed us. She missed her family. She missed her brother a lot.
It's June 3rd, 2014. Renee gets a text message from Lee.
She texted me and she told me that she loved me and that she hoped that I was doing okay and that she was trying to get her life together. And I texted her back and I told her I loved her.
Renee tries to support her daughter however she can, but Lee often doesn't tell her what's going on. June 5th, 2 days later, Renee gets a phone call from her son, Max.
He was frantic. He said, I have been trying to get a hold of Lee. She won't respond.
I knew there was something wrong right away because I couldn't get a hold of her. It was just days of calling back and calling.
Lee always answers her brother, and her family starts to panic. They do everything they can to look for her right away. Renee pays for Lee's phone bill, so she has access to her phone records. She looks at the most recent numbers and starts calling them, hoping for answers about where she might be. One of the numbers belongs to a hotel. She calls and finds out that Lee stayed there with a man named Jesse on June 2nd. The last time Lee's family heard from her was on June 3rd, and they worry something bad might have happened to her after her stay at the hotel.
We needed to find Lee. We needed to spread the word that she was missing. Max flew in from California. Some of Lee's friends started making missing persons posters.
Lee's mom calls the police and files a missing persons report. She tells them what she learned about Lee staying at a hotel with a man named Jesse. The police bring him in for questioning right away, but he claims he said goodbye to Lee at the hotel, and he didn't see her again after that. They don't find any evidence against him, and it's a dead end. Police still don't even know if there was a crime committed, and Lee's family needs answers. Renee knows Lee is really close with her brother Max, so she turns to him, hoping he might know more about what was going on with her leading up to her disappearance. Max reveals that Jesse, the man Lee stayed with at the hotel on June 2nd, was her boyfriend.
She told me Jesse was an amazing tattoo artist.
But he lied about his age at first, and then later, after they clicked, then told her.
She told me very specifically not to tell my mom anything.
Jesse was already 38 years old when 18-year-old Lee met him. Max was worried about his sister. Away from her family and struggling with depression, Lee was skipping classes and spending more and more time with her much older boyfriend. The relationship went downhill quickly, and Lee told Max that she was scared of Jesse and his short temper. He also used drugs, and with all the pressure weighing down on her, Lee started using too.
Lee didn't want to tell us what was happening. I think she was just really having a bad time. I felt very conflicted about it because she didn't want me to tell my mom. I didn't want to push her away.
Lee confided in Max, and he wanted to do all he could to keep her safe. But he knew if he told other people about it, she might view it as a betrayal. It could have broken her trust in him and pushed her even further down a destructive path. He continued to offer love and support to his sister, hoping to show he would always be there for her. She told him that she and Jesse broke up, and she was trying to find a job and start her recovery process. On June 3rd, Max texted her offering to send money to help, but she never responded. After her disappearance, Max tells his mom all that he knows. Renee is shattered to hear about everything her daughter was going through.
It broke my heart. Not Lee. You know, she's so against all that stuff. Max said that she was so afraid if I knew that I would hate her. I wouldn't have hated her. I love her.
Max and his mom find out from one of Lee's friends that she'd been getting clean and turning her life around before her disappearance. Her family knows she wouldn't have just run away without calling Max. They continue to do their own investigating, and Renee notices a recurring number in Lee's phone records. It's also the last number on the call log.
The number was in Westminster, Colorado. It's a little town outside of Denver. When I called that number, a man answered. I said, "This is Renee Jackson. I'm Lee Porter's mother, and I am looking for my daughter." And he told me his name was Chris Wade.
Chris Wade explains that he went to high school in Cotopaxi with Lee. He said he was her accountability partner for her recovery process. Lee posted on Facebook about needing a place to stay after she and Jesse broke up. After he saw the post, Chris reached out and invited her to his apartment. He tells Renee that on June 3rd, they met up and spent the day together, but Lee decided not to stay overnight because even though they went to high school together, they weren't close friends.
He said that she had got a message from her telephone and all of a sudden left. He was polite and he was friendly and he sounded concerned. He said he didn't know she was missing.
As soon as he hears that Lee is missing, Chris joins the search and posts on Facebook looking for help. He even goes on TV to talk about what happened that day and plead for her safe return. While on TV, he says when Lee came over, he found drugs that she had with her, and he confronted her about them before she left. But as Renee watches the interview, she can't help but have doubts about Chris and his story. He seems flustered, and his eyes are constantly shifting. He also seems to try to gain sympathy for himself and shift blame on her, while still acting like he's a close friend.
I thought she was just angry at me because I was playing the part of a concerned friend. I don't really have very many friends, but the friends I do have, I'm very loyal to. Even losing one is a heavy blow for me. I want her to be safe, and I want her to know that I want the best for her.
I was shaking my head, thinking he wasn't a friend of hers. They weren't friends.
Lee's family knows the more time that passes, the less likely it becomes that they'll find her alive. They have to take action, and they focus on Chris, the last person to see Lee. Max has his suspicions, but he doesn't want to scare Chris away, so instead, he works on gaining his trust. Max reaches out, pretending to be sympathetic to him.
He was getting upset because he was starting to become investigated by the police. He was saying that we were blaming him.
I started making him believe that he was helping us look for her.
We spoke to him on and off for about a week. I talked to him very nicely, really subtly.
While Max tries to get Chris to open up to him, police seek answers from Chris too. Just like when he talked to Renee, he acts very helpful. He offers to give investigators all the details he can to help with their search. He tells them that Lee came to his apartment around noon on June 3rd. They got lunch at Boston Market, and then played video games. Then she got a text, and suddenly said she had to leave. A man in a truck pulled up, and she got in and left with him. When Lee's mom hears from detectives what he told them, that detail catches her attention. When she asked Chris earlier about the last day he saw Lee, he didn't mention anything about a man in a truck picking her up.
Wade told the police department a different story than he told me, and that made me very suspicious of him.
June 10th, 7 days after Lee was last seen, detectives search Chris Wade's apartment. There's old food and garbage all over the floor. While picking through the trash, they find a knife next to his mattress. As they look closer, they notice it has bleach stains on it. When they ask why, he says he recently cut his hand, so he cleaned it. Investigators find a receipt for bleach and rubber gloves bought on June 4th, the day after she disappeared. They also notice that the sheets and pillowcases have been removed from Chris's bed. Now, he claims that the day Lee was there, she got a nosebleed, so he took the sheets off and put them in the hamper. But when police ask to see the sheets, he changes his story again, this time saying Lee took them with her when she left. With all the inconsistencies in his explanations, suspicion grows that he was involved. Investigators take him to the police station for more questioning. They pressure him for answers about what happened the day he was with her, and what his intentions were when he invited her over, trying to see if he'll slip up.
In no way did I make any advances on her whatsoever. She had just gotten out of a bad relationship and she wasn't looking for a relationship or anything like that. And I told her straight up, that's fine by me.
He keeps pushing his claim that he was just trying to be a good friend and offer her help while she was struggling. Without any witnesses or evidence, police need answers from him for any hope of finding her, but he continues to evade their questions.
Do you know where Leah is? Honestly, I have no idea where she is. And I'm being accused of something. What do you think? It sounds to me like yes. I maintain my innocence, but I would like a lawyer.
They have to let him go, but they know something seems off about him. Police put him under surveillance, but the investigation stalls. Desperate to find Lee, her family decides to take matters into their own hands.
I want her found more than anything else in this world. I would give up my own life to find her.
Max doesn't know how dangerous Chris Wade could be or what he's capable of, but he knows he's the only one who can give them answers, and he's willing to do anything for his sister. He's been messaging with Chris, slowly earning his trust. Max wants to meet, but he doesn't want him to think he's going to accuse him of anything. After pretending to be on his side, Max is able to convince him to meet under a gazebo at a park. It's June 12th, 9 days after Lee's disappearance. Chris thinks he's meeting with Max and a few of Max's friends so he can do a tarot card reading about Lee, but Max has a different plan.
When he started the tarot card reading, I put my phone on record and just put it down on the table without him realizing.
I don't see any indication of anything or anyone who would want to harm her. There's every chance when she's found, it'll be safe and sound.
Max doesn't believe a word he's saying, but he continues to play along, hoping to make him feel comfortable talking and opening up to him. He gently pushes Chris toward talking about what really happened on June 3rd. Max knows he has to be very careful approaching the subject. Otherwise, Chris might uncover his true intentions and quit talking to him. Max continues to act like they're friends, putting pressure on him for answers, but still encouraging him that he'll be understanding no matter what.
Chris, we just really need to know, man. You know what happened. Chris, please. They're gonna find out eventually. It's gonna eat you up. I won't hold grudges. You tell me right now what happened to my sister. Start talking, please.
Chris is still hesitant to reveal his story, but Max can see he's considering telling him. He knows he did something to his sister, but Max is still the one to comfort Chris, because he can tell showing sympathy will get him to talk.
I totally just told him what he wanted to hear. Eventually, he cracked.
Just start letting it out, man. I know it's hard. You gotta let it out right now. I just need to know.
Okay. I know you guys are probably not going to believe a word of this.
Finally, he starts to tell Max about what he claims happened that day. He says that he offered Lee a place to stay, and he went out to lunch with her. Then they went back to his apartment, but he tells a new story of what happened after they got there.
He said that she tried to ask him for money. He wouldn't give it to her, so supposedly she grabbed a knife and tried to stab him.
She grabbed the knife that I keep by my bed and tried to attack me, saying that she would stop attacking me if I agreed to buy drugs for her.
She wouldn't do that, dude. She wouldn't do that. Chris, stop lying. She wouldn't do that.
I'm not lying.
Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so
I am not lying.
Okay.
Max is growing increasingly angry, but he tries to stay calm, knowing that he needs to keep Chris talking. He even apologizes for questioning his story, because at any moment, Chris could decide to stop talking to him, and he would never get the answers he's been trying so hard to find. Chris continues, saying Lee tried to stab him multiple times, but he dodged and grabbed her instead. Then, he put his hand on her throat and started to choke her.
He said that he grabbed on her neck and he held on to it, and the knife was in between them, and all of a sudden she went limp, and then he noticed that he stabbed her through the sternum.
I should not have done it, but I covered everything up.
Where's your body?
I'll get to that. Just please let me finish from...
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Max has just learned from Chris Wade himself that he killed his sister. It takes an incredible amount of strength to keep his composure, but he's so close to hearing what he did afterwards. Max even calls Chris sir, so he'll still think Max respects him, and so he'll feel like he can tell him the rest of the story.
I did the only thing I could think of, and God help me, I put her in the dumpster. I know you won't believe me, but I will be turning myself in to the police. It'll be within the week, I swear to you.
No, you're going to jail right now. Where do you think you're going, man? You think I'm just going to let you walk away and drive away? You killed my sister.
I freaked out and I jumped over the table and I started attacking him. And my friend tore me off of him.
Get my phone. It has all this recorded. Call the cops.
Max reveals to Chris that he's been recording everything, and he finally lets out some of the anger he's been holding in for so long. Chris Wade lied to everyone, and he pretended to join in the search for Lee after he was the one who killed her. He even told her own brother that he thought she would be safe and sound. Max has had enough of his lies, and he knows if he leaves, he could just run off and never come back. He won't let him get away, and he makes him call the police to confess to them.
911.
Yes, I'd like to confess to a murder.
Okay.
The case is into the disappearance of Lee Porter.
They don't have to wait long before Chris Wade is arrested. Police had him under surveillance, so they watched the whole meeting take place.
No one knew that they were under surveillance, including Max Porter. It's extremely rare that a family member would come in contact with a suspect while he was under surveillance.
Max got a confession from the prime suspect, but his worst fears were also confirmed. Now, he has to call his mom to tell her what happened to Lee.
He was hysterical, and he said, "Mom, Lee's dead. Christopher killed her."
Westminster 911, where's your emergency? My baby, my little baby! That guy just admitted he killed my daughter! Christopher Wade just admitted he killed her!
Christopher Wade has finally confessed and has given his account of what happened that night, but after all of his lying and changing stories, Lee's family doesn't believe he told the full truth. He claims he killed Lee in self-defense, but police quickly learn he's not the innocent man he pretends to be. He joined the army after high school, and he practiced jiu-jitsu for self-defense. But after 2 years in the army, he was discharged after telling psychiatrists he had fantasies of raping and killing women.
Honestly, my fantasy life is private. I keep that completely separate from my normal life.
You lying son of a you killed my daughter.
His argument that he keeps his fantasies separate from real life crumbles even more with the discovery that he tried to kidnap a girl when he was in high school. He intended to kill her, but he was scared off by a dog and ran away. After he was discharged from the army, he started pursuing a degree in criminal justice, saying he hoped to become a police officer. But for years, he's been dreaming of killing a woman, and his claim of self-defense is falling apart.
I believe that he lured her there to kill her.
This was a cold, calculated murder. Without the body, we can't put together what happened in that apartment.
Chris Wade claims he put Lee's body in the dumpster, so the police go to the landfill. They search for weeks. On the 19th day, there's a breakthrough. Police find Lee's phone, along with her purse, wallet, and clothes. The search continues, lasting 45 days in total, but they still can't find her body. Without her body, it's hard for prosecutors to refute Wade's claim that it was self-defense. They offer a plea deal, second-degree murder in exchange for the location of her body. He accepts. However, after the paperwork is signed, he just tells them the same story from earlier, that he put her body in the dumpster.
We could not go to a judge and say, we can prove that this man's lying to us. We want you to reject this plea bargain. There's no way we can prove that.
We feel wholeheartedly that he lied, and she was not in that dump, and he did not do with her what he told the police he did with her.
They can't prove that he hid her body somewhere else, so the plea deal stands. On November 6, 2015, Christopher Wade is sentenced to 48 years in prison for second-degree murder. He will have to serve 75% of his sentence before he's eligible for parole. Lee's family still doesn't know the full story of what happened to her, but without their efforts, Christopher Wade likely would have gotten away with murder. They continue to think of Lee and honor her memory every day, and they won't give up hope that someday they might find her body and bring her home.
I look forward to the day that I get to meet my daughter. But in the meantime, I'm gonna try and find her. She needs to come home with us. She needs to be somewhere near her family.
It took an incredible amount of courage for Max to not only face the man who killed his sister, but to put all his pain and anger aside while he pretended to befriend him in order to get answers. Today, he hopes to help others in similar situations, showing how you can turn tragedy into purpose.
I was so proud of my son.
Max is a hero, and he did that for his sister because he loved her so much.
It was an amazing scenario that I've never seen in 25 years of being a prosecutor, where a family member confronts a suspect and gets a confession out of the suspect. If it was my sister, I might have done the same thing.
Throughout everything, Max has always loved and looked out for Lee. It was his bond with his little sister that helped him see through her killer's lies and bring him to justice. In a post on Facebook, Max writes, "I miss you, Lee. Your friends and family will always be here for you, and we will never give up on finding you and helping others that are stuck in the same predicament. I love you more than my own life, forever and always. You will never be forgotten. You are a beautiful soul. You will always be my best friend, sister, and support.